This week's song is the Caissons Go Rolling Along. Now, if you do a little bit of background historical research on this song, you'll notice that it does have an interesting history. In the music that you received from me, I believe that they attribute the song to a composer named Edmund Gruber. And Edmund Gruber was in the army himself, but there's also been some attributes to John Philip Sousa. And I cannot get a handle as to whether John Philip Sousa did the music and Gruber did the lyrics. I know that the lyrics have even been changed over the years, where it says the army goes rolling along, as opposed to caissons, which are your four-wheeled artillery movers and other things as well. But nonetheless, this is done by either and or Edmund Gruber and John Philip Sousa. One of the great marches, and I'm very excited to go over it with you today. Now, something you need to be a little bit careful of in regards to marches is knowing whether you are playing in what we call cut time or not. And I'm going to give you the opportunity to decide for yourself whether cut time is something that you would like to entertain or not. In giving songs out like Caissons in the past, even this specific song, I have had students find that playing it in what we would call common time, quote unquote common time, leads the song for them, they said, to feel like it was a little bit lagging, almost like that the caissons were dragging along as opposed to rolling along, and therefore they took it upon themselves to try to find a way to fix that. Unfortunately, in trying to find a way to fix it, sometimes students go in a different direction, which I am going to go over with you in just a moment. I've had other students, though, before I get to that, have told me that pace is as fast as I can go. And that's, you know, that the way that it is, I cannot surpass that. So forget about playing twice as fast as that. That's the pace that I'm comfortable going. So again, I'm going to leave that decision up to you in regards to whether you'd like to play it at a little bit of a faster pace or not. The one thing that I would like you not to do is to manipulate your tempo such to make that determination as to whether you're going to play faster or not. Now, that might sound funny because we always speak about tempo as being a big deciding factor when we are determining our pace. And as I have said in the past, tempo is a big factor, but it is not the only factor. It is tempo as compared to the values of the notes that need to be played. So when we're talking about something called cut time is a very, I'm going to say, easy way, not to do, but to establish the idea behind, a very easy way for a composer to tell you to play faster without having to change either the tempo nor the printed value of the note that you see. Now, we're all familiar with our note values, and if we're talking about a song, let's say that's in 4/4 time, we have our whole note, which counts to 4, we have our half note, which counts to 2, we have our quarter note, which counts to 1, and then our eighth note, that gets a half of a beat. Now, when I talk about cut time, what I'm referencing is taking all of these notes and cutting their time value right in half. So this top note that got 4 gets 2. This second note which got 2 gets 1. This third note which got 1 gets a half. Every single note value that you see gets half as much time as it would normally receive. Now, what that's going to manifest itself in is you going twice as fast as you normally would. Now, do you have to do that? You do not have to do that. Again, I've had some students that have been compelled to do that because they said, at the tempo that you have this set at, or that I had it set at, it just seems so darn slow that I needed to speed it up. And there are two ways that you can speed it up. If you do it that way, it's going to sound much better, much more acceptable than if you do it the other way. The other way would be doubling the tempo, because that's essentially what I'm doing here. I'm upping my tempo, doubling it, playing in what we call double time. But let's say my song was at 120 beats per minute. And let's say it's a march, as Caissons is. Is that going to sound good at 240 beats per minute? I don't think so. Whenever I think of particular rhythms, styles of music, certain styles denote certain speeds, or in a roundabout way anyhow. And it's why when you choose particular backgrounds on your instrument, if you're using an instrument that has styles like clavinova or like Lowry, they all come up at different rates of speed. Now you can change those rates, but you notice they don't just all come up at 60. Because, yeah, ballads sound good at 60, but big band certainly doesn't. If you put Little Brown Jug at 60 beats per minute, it's going to sound not as good. I mean, just frankly, it's going to sound better the faster you can go. Well, am I going to play a ballad at the same speed I play a Little Brown Jug? Well, obviously, no. So your styles that you have available to you come up at speeds that generally would be acceptable tempos for that type of music. Can you change them? Yes, but they come up at a certain rate for a certain reason. And most of your marches are going to come up somewhere between 100 and, let's say, 120, 130. Okay? There are exceptions to the rule. There are some that are maybe a little bit slower. Some of your basic marches might be a little bit slower. Some of your, faster marches, particularly if you might be at a different time signature, which we're not going to go over today, it could be at a different pace. But by and large, your tempos for marches are really between about 100 and, let's say, 125. Okay? That's because if I have a march at 125 and I have a lot of longer notes, and I say, gosh, I need to play this, gosh, I feel like it would be better twice as fast. 250 beats per minute is not going to sound right with a march. If it was to sound right with a march, they would have put it at that speed. I often equate putting a tempo at a rate at that pace, and your instruments will do it. A lot of these instruments go up to like 300 beats per minute, sometimes higher. You ever going to play a song that fast? Probably not. They go down to about 20. You're going to play a song that slow? Again, probably not. But when you double a tempo and you get up to that 230, 40, 50 beat per minute range, and the rhythm style is not really designed to be played that fast, it reminds me of that old I Love Lucy episode where she's working at the chocolate factory and the chocolate's coming faster and faster, and she's trying to, put it where it needs to go, and she's stuffing it in her mouth after a while, and it just makes a complete mess. That's what I think of when I think of a tempo that is put well faster than it's supposed to be played. You take a Hawaiian song, 60, 70 beats per minute. You put that at 120, 130, a march is going to sound great there, but Hawaiian's not. So what do? How do we increase? Well, you can increase by a couple degrees. You could say, well, it came up at 115 and I'm going to bring it up to 125. That's not an incredibly large jump, though. It's going to be a jump, but it's not going to be an incredibly large jump. Whereas if you were to take it and play in what we call cut time, you just leave it where it is. You leave your tempo where it either came up or where you put it originally, and you say, all of these notes that I see, I need to hold them down for half as long as I normally would. So again, my whole notes become 2 beats, my half notes become 1 beat. You go all the way down the line, and you count it out that way. So are you playing it at that speed? The short answer is I don't know. Other than hearing you play, watching you play, if you send me a video or you come to our studio here, I'm just going to have to take your word for it that you are either playing in cut time or not. That can be an issue. I want you to be in cut time only if you know you are. I want you to know you're in cut time. Or I want you to know you're not. The problem with not knowing is that if you're already in cut time and then you hear me say, well, he told me about going twice as fast, now you're trying to quadruple the speed. You're up to 400 and some beats per minute. I would never have you play that fast. Your instrument can't even go that fast. Even if you wanted to bring the tempo, you can't get that high. So I want you to know, if you're already in cut time, that there is really nowhere else you can go. You can bring the tempo up maybe a couple clicks from where it originally was, but to a certain point, you're gonna have to cap it, okay? And I don't want you to try to go any faster than cut time if you're already there. Well, how about if you're not in cut time? You want to be able to know that that is an option. I've had a lot of students, again, come in and say, this just seems so slow, what can I do? I said, well, you can go in cut time. How do I know I'm in cut time? It's a very easy way to figure this out. It's a little bit of a mathematical equation. I'm going to do some really simple numbers here because I'm not really good at doing math in my head. The first thing you need to do, and I did not count out this song, so do not count this as my example. Let's say that I have a song that is comprised of 2 pages, and there are 15 measures on each page. I counted out every single measure. And the song's in 4/4. Well, that means that there are 4 beats in each one of those 30 measures, because there are 15 on page 1, there are 15 on page 2. Each one of those measures has a 4 count. What I do is I multiply 30, which is the amount of measures there are in the song, times 4. 3, 6, 9, 12, 120. That means that there are 120 total beats in the song. Again, I'm using very easy numbers here, okay? I take that 120 beats in the song in total, and I apply a tempo to it. Let's say I put that song at 60 beats per minute. Well, if I put that song at 60 beats per minute, and there are 120 beats in the song itself, how long is it going to take me to play the song? 2 minutes. Not 2 minutes and 35 seconds, not 3 minutes, not 30 seconds, not 45 seconds, 2 minutes. 60 beats per minute, there's 120 beats in the song. It should take you 1 minute to play page 1, a second minute to play page 2. Exactly. If you don't make any mistakes, that's what it should be. Obviously, if I was at 120 beats per minute, it would take me 1 minute. Now that is in what we call common time, meaning counting the notes out the way that they would normally be denoted to be counted out. So if you figure out a roundabout way, now it's not always going to be a perfect number that you can divide by, but it's going to give you a roundabout number. If you figure that number out and all of a sudden you play it and you're playing it in half as much time as it tells you, what happened? You're in cut time. Okay? Which is fine. If you want to be in cut time, I just want you to know that you're there. I want you to know you're in cut time. And that is the easiest way to do it. Now, could you count out every individual note? Of course you could count out every individual note. It's a lot more difficult to do because you might have eighth notes, you might have quarters, you might have dotted halves. Now you're counting, well, this gets, rather than doing that, just say every one of these measures in one way, shape, or form counts to 4. So however many measures there are, each one counts to 4. You multiply the amount of measures by the amount of beats in each measure, and you divide that by your intended tempo, and that should give you, as I said, a roundabout idea as to how long it should take you, and that is very, very important. You want to know whether you're in cut time or not so that you can either apply cut time if you'd like, or you know this is as fast as I'm able to go. I do actually need to manipulate my tempo, maybe by bringing it up 5 or 10, probably at the most. And in doing that and playing it in cut time, it should therefore make it seem a lot faster, because again, you've doubled everything by doing that. You bring it up 10 beats per minute, you're playing in cut time, it's like you brought it up 20. Okay? And you've only brought it up by a small degree, so you're not going to feel like Lucy in the Chocolate Factory. Now, you've been given 2 different copies of the song this week. One has letters inside of the notes, the other does not. Now, if you're looking for a suggestion from me, my suggestion would be to start with the one with the letters inside of the notes first. And it's not just simply because of that. That is obviously going to be a help, I'm sure, to you. But my reasoning for going through that one first is that it is very cut and dry what is expected of you in both of your hands. Your right hand is obviously going to be responsible for playing the notes, and your left hand is going to be responsible for just playing chords, simple chords, no bass notes. That's what the other copy is for. And most of these chords, many of them anyhow, you can get away with using possibly just one finger if you're playing on an instrument that provides you the opportunity not to have to play all of your fingers. So the C chord, I know it's C, E, G, or G, C, E, or E, G, C, but if my instrument lets me just play a C and it sounds like a chord, go right ahead and play a C, okay? I have the G chord. I have a D chord, regular D major chord this week. I have a regular E major chord this week as well, and an F major chord. Now the only chord that is going to force me, I'm going to use the word force, to play more than one finger is the A minor. So the A minor, you have to play at least the A and then what makes it a minor, which is the C. But the full A minor chord would be A, C, and E. Now those other chords you can play more than one finger obviously, and some of you may decide to do that. You will also notice that in some instances we see above some of the chords a 7. So for example, I have a G7 in a few different instances in the song, and I believe there's one D7. Well, the G7 and the D7 for that matter are optional. You don't have to do them. They're not inside the box, so they're not even encouraging you really to do them, but they are an option. And what they would entail is an additional tone added to both the G chord and the D chord respectively. The G chord, you play a G chord, and to it you'd add an F. Now if you're just playing one finger for the G chord, if your instrument's allowing you the ability to get a whole G chord with just one finger, you just add the F to it. It's 2 keys. Same with the D chord. You play the whole D chord, but some of you have an instrument that affords you the ability not to do that. Just play the D, and you can just play one key, play the D, add the C to it. D and C will give you the D7 or the, in that case, G7. But it is a D chord along with a C. It is a G chord along with an F. In terms of the timing in this song, it's pretty straightforward. The sections at the end of lines 1 and 3 are a little tricky because there are 4 notes in the measure. There are 4 beats in the measure. And whenever that happens, there's this possibility or potential for you to want to play all of those notes as if they are even. And in this song, we do see a little bit of that on the second page. So what I have found that students have struggled with a little bit is making the distinction between 4 note measures on the first page and then 4 note measures on the second. On the second, they're all quarters. On the first page, in the measures where you have 4 notes, the end of line 1, end of line 3, the first note gets a beat and a half. Now this is in common time anyway, so we're going to beat and a half on that first note. The next note, as a direct result of it, gets a half a beat, so that's 2 full beats, and then beats 3 and 4 are just 1 beat apiece. Okay, so you're holding that second note down for a half a beat longer. The next note is held down for half a beat less than it normally would be held down if it was a quarter, to reflect the fact that the other one got a little bit more, so you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul here. And then you have the last 2 notes, which are just evenly distributed 1 beat apiece. Every time on the second page, and we see it, let me see here, at least 3 times, once on each one of the lines, you have 4 notes, but they're all even. So those technically should be easier, but if you can very easily fall into the habit, I'll say for myself, have fallen into the habit of playing the ones that are on page 2 like the ones that are on page 1, or vice versa. So you want to be a little bit careful with that. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to set us up. We're going to hear this played piano-based. We're going to hear it played organ-based. We're going to also hear it played using the rhythm style. And so you're going to hear a couple different renditions of this. You can choose your poison, and you decide which one works out the best for you. And I'm going to show you what it sounds like in both regular time and cut time, but I am using a march no matter what. Caissons go rolling along. If you have a march, go ahead and use a march. It's going to be the best thing for this song. And the march I'm going to be using is going to come up at about 112 beats per minute. Okay? And that's where I'm going to stick. I'm going to stick right with that speed. When I play it in cut time, it's going to appear as if I'm going a little bit faster. My fingers are, but my tempo is not. My tempo is going to stay right where it is. Okay? We're also going to introduce the other copy. The other copy, the right hand is identical. I mean, the letters aren't there, but the right hand is identical. What is a little bit different in the right hand, or rather the left hand, is there is a distinction between chords and bass tones. Now in this one, since I gave you another copy, we're not going to alter this one at all. If you're going to play this one, the idea is to play the letter outside of the box in the left hand as a bass tone. The letter inside of the box is a chord. And you're going to notice something really interesting with this song, even when you're not using a rhythm, because this would be one that you'd likely not use a background for. The other one, I would say definitely this one, you're kind of on your own creating the beat yourself. And how do we create a beat but with bass and chords? So by virtue of you following along with this, you know, it should be fine without a beat because you're going to be the beat. Okay? What's very interesting about this particular copy is the movement of the bass. The bass is really what is setting the pace to this song. The bass sets the pace. Okay, very easy way to remember it. And there's a bass walk down on line 2. There's another one on line 4, very similar to Little Brown Jug, where it walked down from the G to the C, and we see that again. And that's when the caissons go rolling along. So there's this rolling feel of moving down, 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 down. They're rolling. It's like they're rolling away. Okay. But marches, again, denote movement. I mean, rhythm itself denotes movement, but particularly marches. It's a very structured count. One of the really tricky things about marches is it's not like a jazz song where you can kind of fiddle around with the timing a little bit. You've got to be almost as perfect as you can with a march in order for it to sound authentic. Okay. Now I'd like you to look at lines 1 and 3, because the walk on the second and fourth line are pretty overt. It's just a bass, 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 bass. Look at lines 1 and 3. Lines 1 and 3 are comprised of a C chord, and it's played over and over and over again. But in the middle of each C chord that you go back to, the bass walks. It starts with a C, then it plays a C chord, then it goes to a B, then it plays a C chord, then it goes to an A, and it plays a C chord, then it goes to the G. And then it walks down from the G down to that lower C. And so you're walking here, if you end up using 2 different Cs, which is a possibility for you, you're walking a whole octave in your left hand amongst these chords. And what you're going to notice is that movement is going to sound very march-like. That movement of the left hand. I'm going to have you watch my hand when I do it so you can see what that sounds like. Now on an organ, how are we going to do it on an organ? The bass on the organ comes from the bass pedals. So I'm going to go ahead and set my pedals up so that I can actually play them as bass, which many of you have the ability to do. If you're playing on an organ, anything from the EZ10 and above, you have these pedals on the floor. And they're not there just for show. They're there for you to attempt to play, in this case, some bass tones. So I'm going to show you how we're going to do that, and I think you're going to really like the way that it sounds. So we're going to reset here. I'm going to play the song for you a couple different times, different ways. Some in cut time, some in common time, some using bass, some just using the style. I am going to follow a general arrangement whereby when I get to the top of the second page, I'm going to make a change. The first 4 lines are virtually identical. The first 2 lines are repeated note for note on lines 3 and 4. Then we get to the top of the second page where it says, oh, it's hi, hi, ho, in the hi, hi, he, rather, in the field artillery. Call out your numbers loud and strong. I'm going to use a new sound for that. It's kind of the bridge section, okay? Then it flips right back into caissons go rolling along. So when we get to line 3, so wherever we go, you will always know the caissons go rolling along. I'm going to go back to what I started with. So this is kind of that AABA setup, okay? So I'm going to set this one up this week, starting out on the clavinova, but doing it differently than I've been doing it, where I'm going to be using it with the whole band. Many of you have clavinovas and Lowrys, and you have these beats that you can abide by and use to time yourself, and we're going to use one this week. We're going to use a march, and we'll show you how caissons Go Rolling Along can sound all put together. Okay, so here we are at the Clavinova CVP 709. I'm using a march beat. I'm at 112 beats per minute, and I'm going to go through the song for you twice. I'm going to start out playing in common time, 112 as it sits. So I'm going to let the introduction end, and you're going to hear me count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and then on 3, I'm going to jump right in, just so you can kind of get a feel for what the beat is going to be. You can also take a look, I don't know if you can see this from where your vantage point is, but in the screen right underneath where it says 112, there's a light that flashes that gives me a visual cue. I'm using 2 different arrangements. First page, I'm going to be using a flute and woodwind arrangement. When I get to the top of the second page, I'm going to go to a brass band. And when I get to the third line of the second page, I'm going to go back to that flute and woodwind. Now, I'm going to get to the end. I need to restart. When I restart, I'm going to play it in cut time. Now, you don't need to restart. There's not any double dots there. You can just end it right there. But I want you to hear it both in common time and cut time, and I'm not going to break them up with one another for a couple reasons. One, I want you to see that my tempo never changes. My tempo stays, so I'm not bringing that up. It's staying right at 112. It's going to appear as if I'm going faster, but they are not. And I want to show you that this can be done. There might be some of you that say, I want the best of both worlds. I want to play it as it's written and I want to play it in cut time. Well, that's the way that you would do it. You would play it as it's written first, establish it, and then speed it up, and you can really impress somebody the second time around. All right? Got a little introduction. I'm going to play a C chord again. Regular time the first time through. When I get to the end, cut time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Okay, so how about playing the more traditional version? Here on a piano, what I would do is I would play the single notes as a bass tone and the chords that are in the boxes as a chord. Okay, so there's a really interesting thing that happens here. Obviously, you see this, or if you go an octave lower, okay, but take a look at that first line. It starts out with a C and then a chord, B. It's got this movement to it that even precedes the That's pretty obvious because it's really staring you in the face. But when you have that chord in the middle, you're going to notice that it's going to do a lot in terms of giving you a feeling of movement throughout this song. So here we go with Caissons played through one time the way I might do it on a piano. We'll finish up with how we might do it traditionally played on an organ. Now, if you notice there at the end, the last two measures, I played those an octave higher than I was playing before in the bass. So instead of being here, I was up here. And I just wanted you to be able to see that there is a difference in the sound. And some may prefer one over the other. So I wanted you to hear them both, and you make that decision if you're playing this traditionally piano bass, whether you want the bass here or down here. It's entirely up to you. Okay, so on the Lowry, I can do what I had done earlier. I can put on a march beat, I can put it at 112 beats per minute, choose two arrangements that I think would sound nice. But I wanted to show you how I might do this played a little bit more traditionally like an organ. So I have these letters outside of the boxes. Well, those would be these bass pedals. These pedals are a big keyboard on the floor. I have my chords, which are here. So the idea is to play the bass pedals when you have the letter outside of the box, the chord when you have the letter inside of the box. Now I did take the liberty of putting on the MCS option. MCS, I believe, starts on the Easy 10, and it gives you the ability to play the chords in a very helpful way where you might only want to use one or two fingers to play the chord. It will play the rest, but it won't play the bass. The bass is going to be up to me. Okay, if I put the easy button on, it'll play the bass as well. This is me saying, I want to play the bass. I want you to help me a little bit with the chords. So I'm going to take this very slowly. I am going to back myself up just a little bit. Hopefully I can still play it, but I'd like you to see the movement of my feet. And I'm wondering maybe where you're sitting, if that's an option. I'm hoping that you can see these pedals or at least see my foot moving under here. And I'm going to take it, as I said, very slowly. And I think you're going to think it sounds pretty good. So here we go with Caissons, Go Rolling Along on an organ. Now, because it's a march, I won't get too deep into this because we're pretty much at the end of the lesson here. But don't forget, for those of you that can decide what you want the pedals to sound like, you can go into pedal sounds and choose a bass sound which may be more apt to be heard during a march. So you could go find yourself a tuba, you can go find yourself a sousaphone, and I'm just going to scroll to one of those quickly just so you can hear what that might sound like. And when I step on these pedals here, that's what you're going to get, is you're going to hear that sound instead. So instead of hearing that low bass organ sound, well, here's a sousaphone. So if you bring the bass back in, sounds much more march-like. So there are a variety of ways that this could be done. As always, take the most direct route first, and then you can embellish from there. Start with the other one, see where you get, think about the cut time possibly, and then you can move on to a little bit more to do with the bass and the chords if you get there. Well, I hope you enjoyed our lesson this week on the Caissons Go Rolling Along. If you have any questions or concerns, there are a variety of ways that you can reach out to us. Probably the most direct way would be to go to our website, which is keys2funmusic.com. There's a little chat box in there, and if you type into the chat box, you'll be able to talk with me firsthand. You can also send us an email. Same website, it's info@keys2funmusic.com. Be happy to help you out with any questions that you have. I look forward to seeing you again very soon.